Hi everyone. So a couple of days ago I made a video about the RX 9070 and I had a couple of comments from people telling me that I should try undervolting my GPU just to get a little bit more performance out of it. I've seen reports online that by getting a good clock speed and a good power draw, you can actually get the performance up to or close to the 9070 XT. So I thought, you know what, why not give that a go? You know, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. The main thing is that I want to get a stable clock, right? I don't want to just test it for this video and then like have it be unstable and then just go back to stock setting. Just as a disclaimer, I have a POWERCOLOR HELLHOUND, and just because you have the same card as me doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the same settings on your overclock. You might be able to push it further, or you might run into issues. It depends on various factors that I'm not smart enough to understand. But yeah, I just want to put a disclaimer out there that just because I've hit these settings on this card, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it as well. I've chosen 3 benchmarks for this video, and then I've tried doing like stability tests and all of that, but we'll get to that later. The 3 benchmarks that I chose were Thermark, just the normal donut one. I chose Cyberpunk 2077, and I'll get to the settings on that in a minute. And the final one that I did was TimeSpy. And I think that these 3 give a good indication of like, you know, the performance increases that we might be getting. Let's take a look at the factory settings here. And just at completely stock clock speeds and stock power draw. On Thermark, we got a score of 5,724 frames. This is at the 4K setting, and I've been using 4K on all of these just because that's what I play at. And again, this is more of like a real world thing. I don't want to do like a ton of benchmarks of settings that I'm not going to realistically be using, right? And on Cyberpunk, all the settings are on high, and I turned ray tracing on as well. And I'm using FSR4 quality mode using Optiscaler because the drivers still ain't out for that. With these settings, I got an average FPS of 54.09. So let's just round it down to 54. 54 frames per second with these settings, which is honestly pretty respectable for like ray tracing. And then finally, I tried TimeSpy, and because I'm kind of a noob at benchmarking, I didn't realize that there's actually like a specific 4K TimeSpy benchmark. So what I did was I used the normal TimeSpy benchmark, but then changed the resolution up to 4K. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't give us like an overall score, but we really only want to look at the graphics score rather than the CPU score. And with this, I got 12,883. So pretty respectable scores. But I think we can push it further. The 2 settings that I really want to be looking at here are the voltage offset and the power limit. And these are really the only 2 settings that matter. Like, I've seen reports online, because I did kind of look it up. I looked at some Reddit threads and stuff, and some people were saying that using different memory clock speeds and all of this caused more instability. So really the only 2 settings that I wanted to look at were that voltage offset and the power draw. I set the voltage offset to -50 MV, and I set the power limit to +5%. I mean, the benchmarks kind of speak for themselves. On Thermark, we went up from 5,700 up to 6,008, which is a 4.9% increase. Cyberpunk was even more impressive. We went from 54 FPS to 57.95, so let's just say 58 FPS, which is a 7.1% increase. I know that that's only 4 FPS more, but when you're at these lower frame rates, I don't want to say that 54 is a low frame rate, especially with ray tracing, but it is a lower frame rate. Just 4 FPS is quite substantial. So that's a 7% increase in frames. TimeSpy, finally, we went from 12,883 up to 13,618, which is a 5.7% increase. So yeah, we are around 5 to 7% on these benchmarks. So that's quite a substantial boost, really. Again, the 9070 XT is 10 to 15% more, right? I thought, you know, I'm going to push it a little bit further because I do think that we can get really within the margin of error of the 9070 XT. So the next thing that I did, I went down to -75 MV. To begin with, I was a little bit concerned because on the Thermark score, it literally didn't change at all. It went from 6008 to 6009, no change at all. So I was thinking, okay, I haven't hit a limit as far as how far I can push the overclock on this. Then I tried Cyberpunk, and thankfully Cyberpunk went up by 1 FPS. It went up from 58 to 59 FPS. But again, that 1 FPS is quite a big difference. We're now from 7% to a 9% increase over stock. And Time Spy went up from 13,600 to 13,800, which again, that's a 7.3% increase. So yeah, Thermark didn't have any difference, but both Cyberpunk and Time Spy did. This is kind of what I'm eyeing at the moment. So the next thing that I tried was keeping the voltage offset the same, but then I put the power up to 10%. And this one surprised me quite a bit, because with 10% power, we actually went up from 6,009 to 6,246. So that's quite a substantial boost, really. Compared to stock, that's a 9.1% increase. So now we're really within the margin of error of that 10 to 15% power increase from the 9070 XT, right? Then I tried Cyberpunk, and surprise, surprise, with this 10% power, we went up by 1 more FPS, which seems to be a bit of a pattern here. We're now at 60 FPS on average, with ray tracing on Cyberpunk, with FSR4 obviously, but that is pretty amazing. That is a 10.6% increase from stock settings. Remember, at stock settings we were at 54 FPS, so that's pretty substantial. And then finally Time Spy, we went up to 14,000, which is an 8.9% increase over stock. Just for fun, I thought, okay, let's push it even further and give it a negative 100 voltage offset and keep it at that 10% power draw, because I just wanted to see, how far we can push it. I tried Thermark and it literally crashed straight away. It was warming up and it crashed straight away with this negative 100 voltage offset. So I think that this is probably maybe a bit too far for the GPU. So I decided to put the settings back down to negative 75, and I also put the power draw down to 7%. And the reason why I did this was because I thought maybe that's a good sweet spot. But then I thought, let's do some real world testing, because it's one thing to have benchmarks, like I said at the start, it's one thing to have benchmarks that show, the power increase, but then it's another thing entirely to have the games that you play actually be stable, right? So with this 7% power draw and negative 75, I launched Spider-Man 2, which is a pretty taxing game on the GPU. You can see here that it draws, with these settings, it draws about 3.1 gigahertz, which I'm pretty sure that at stock, this card is supposed to run at 2.6, so that's quite a substantial increase. Spider-Man 2, unfortunately, crashed pretty much straight away, so I thought, oh god. So then I just put it back down to 5% power limit, and launched Spider-Man 2 again, and the game was running fine. And it's really sort of not a substantial difference as far as the voltage here. I'm going to keep these settings, negative 75 voltage offset and 5% power. I think that is a good sweet spot as far as these benchmarks have shown me. But again, I need to make sure that it's stable enough. So I went back onto 3D Mark. I ran the Steel Nomad stress test, and on the end screen on Steel Nomad, it says that it needs 97% to pass the stress test. The 9070 with these overclock settings was a 99% frame rate stability, which is above the 97%. So I thought, okay, cool, that passed, right? I thought, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to run another stress test, because, I want to make sure that it works just fine. The second one that I tried was Time Spy Extreme specifically, because I found out about the Extreme version. And again, we hit 98.7%. So they both passed, and they seem to be pretty good. No crashes, anything like that. But because of the way my mind works, I thought, that's not good enough. I don't want to put this video out there just from having done some benchmarks, right? So I thought, right, well, I'm going to do some real world testing. I played Silent Hill 2, which is a UE5 game, which are notoriously bad anyway. And I thought, well, if the game does crash, is that a UE5 problem, or is that a problem with the GPU? But thankfully, aside from some issues getting Optiscaler up and running, I've had no problems so far with Silent Hill 2. But if you remember just a second ago, I was talking about Spider-Man 2 and how Spider-Man 2 has like crashed, right? So I thought that's a great game to try stress testing. So it didn't crash, no problems. So I think that these settings are stable enough, and I'm gonna stick with these for now. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty successful mission, I think. With these settings, I've got between a 5 and 10% increase in power just from pushing it a little bit further. Another thing that I really wanted to look at was the temps, because it's all well and good to have more performance, but if the temperatures are so much higher, then it's not going to matter really. There's no point. Surprisingly, the temps compared to stock were pretty much not affected. At stock, I mentioned in my 9070 video, it never really went above 65 and it hovers around 60 to 62 degrees. I'm happy to report that it's pretty much the same here. With these settings, it's around 60 to 62 degrees. So there hasn't been any temperature increase whatsoever. So I'm very happy with this result, and I'm going to stick with this for a while. If there are any stability issues that I run into in the future with other games, because again, I didn't test too many games here, but if there are stability issues, I will update you guys in the comments. I'll just post a comment and pin it and say that, oh, I've gone down to this, or maybe I increased the settings as well. Maybe I found another sweet spot, right? But for now, I'm pretty happy with this, and I definitely recommend looking at overclocking because, yeah, just getting a little bit more performance for basically no temperature cost or no stability cost. It's really a no-brainer. So I hope that you found this video informative or entertaining, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe because it helps the channel a lot. Yeah, that's going to do it for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.